Cheerio. Kyungye. Hi everyone, welcome to Taekwondo Thursday. Wow, I think this is episode 10. We're fairly getting through the weeks. It'll be Christmas before we know it. No, I didn't say Christmas already, did I? No, I didn't say Christmas in August. Forget that. Anyway, this week's request for Taekwondo Thursday video is inward versus outward, as opposed to inside versus outside techniques. So we're going to look at comparing and contrasting them and explaining what exactly they mean. They're basically terminology, but it's also important to understand the implications of them as well. So we'll start off with going through inward versus outward. An inward technique is a technique that's traveling towards your center line. So if I'm coming from the outward part of my body towards the center line, that would be an inward technique. It could be a block or a strike, but it's traveling towards my center line. That would be inward. Outward is when a technique is traveling away from my center line. Away from my center line. So if we look at the inner forearm middle block inside Yumaki, that's traveling away from my center line, so that would be outward. Same with the forearm low block, that's traveling outward because it's going away from the center line. Of course, it's going downward as well, it's diagonal, but we're talking about inward and outward, so in this regard it is outward. All you need to know about inward versus outward is it's your own body that it's in relation to, your center line. It's got nothing to do with your opponent, and that will become increasingly important to understand when we look at inside and outside techniques. They will be in relation to your opponent. So one more time, because I really want you to understand this, an inward technique is traveling towards your center line. An outward technique is traveling away from your center line. If you understand that, it doesn't get any more complicated. Cheerio, kyungye. For inside and outside techniques, this is in relation to your opponent's attacking tool. So you can only know if a technique is done inside or outside if you have if you have an opponent or a partner. So if Mr. Filkowski is putting out either fist, this is his inner forearm. We're just going to adjust the angle a bit here, I think, just to try and help you. This is his inner forearm, and then over here, this is his outer forearm. If my block makes contact with his inner forearm, it's an inside block. If my block makes contact with his outer forearm, it's an outside block. The same applies to the legs. If he does a front snap kick, if I'm blocking to the inside of his tibia, it's an inside block. If I'm blocking to the outside of his tibia, it's an outside block. It doesn't get any more complicated than that either. You just need to know their inner and outer forearm, and same with the tibia. Let's look at the change of technique. Let's say he's doing a knife and inward strike. Now the orientation of his arm is changed, so you might think that this is an inside block, but it's not. This is his outer forearm. So because I'm making contact with his outer forearm, it is an outside block, even though it might look like it was an inside block earlier. If his arm turns around, and now it's just changed to a reverse knife and strike, this is now an inside block, purely because his arm is turned around, so it's now the inner forearm that I'm making contact with. Hopefully that's clear. So that's the difference in terms of orientation. Let's look at the implications of doing an inside versus outside block. When we do a normal inside block, let's say against the punch again, and let's look at it maybe more of a free sparring perspective. So from here, put your right foot forward, please. Thank you. So from here, if he's throwing a right jab here, and I block from the inside, what this does is, it allows the opponent to use their other arm quite freely, because now his left comes into play very easily. Whereas if I parry and do an outside block, what this does is it obscures his other arm. It cuts off the other arm for my opponent to use as an easy attacking tool. So there is a big advantage of doing outside techniques in this orientation. If you do an inside block, well then what you should do ideally is do a simultaneous, if you just throw a punch, do a simultaneous technique. So block and counter at the same time. And that at least gives you the opportunity to stop your opponent using their other arm because you've already hit them. So when you're doing inside blocks, doing a simultaneous counterattack can be extremely useful to give you that extra protection and advantage. So that is inside versus outside. Cheerio, kyungye. Cheerio, kyungye. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.